Filthy Casual Neon Podcast, your stop for everything narrative in the Age of Sigmar. My name is Aaron, and with me today is Nuno. Good
Hi,
morning,
folks.
Nuno.
Hey there. How are you?
Glad to be back. This is technically our second episode. We're basically getting into a routine here. Been doing a little bit of traveling. I believe we're in actually different time zones today. Is that right, Nuno?
Mm-hmm.
So our first episode came out a few weeks ago. We were trying to squeeze that in before Realms at War actually kicked off. We had done a little talking about that and felt it was timely to get that out ahead of schedule. But we're on track, and we're going to be talking about some upcoming narrative events in the Age of Sigmar community, as well as some past and current events. Predominantly right now, we're recording on Saturday, November 2nd, and some exciting stuff going on in the world right now. You wanna talk about any of those quickly?
Yeah, so
Nuno?
as we're doing this, so Holy Havoc is happening, and the folks are having a great time. It's all over Twitter. And also we're having a bit of narrative hijack in Warhammer Achievements. So Steve Foote has gone in dressed up as a Skaven Warp Digger, and other folks are bringing their own army narrative. It's like they're hijacking it, and I hope they gather more interest for this kind of stuff.
All right. Yeah, it's looking awesome. The pictures that are coming out, of course, we both know when you're at an event as a player, you're so focused on what's going on that a lot of the pictures that you take end up getting shared later. So we'll look forward to seeing a lot more stuff coming up in the next week. So we want to talk briefly about what the show is about. We talk about playing in and running narrative events for Age of Sigmar, and we try to help guide you, the listeners, to where you can find awesome events or even start your own. And
where to find them, how to join them, how to run them.
Yes. And the NEON is acronym for the Narrative Event Organizers Network. It's been around for a couple of years. It was the group that started the Coalescence Global narrative event, and is basically promoting ways for people to create and share narrative events, along with tips and advice and things like that. We have a Facebook group, and we also have a Twitter account, and our website is wearetheneon.com.
And that's where you can find packs for previous events that have been ran. We need to fill it up with more recent ones, but if you want any ideas on how to stuff your narrative event with custom rules that have already been ran by several people, that's your stop.
Yep, and we have a contact page on there. Please send us information about an event that you're getting ready to run, or some suggestions for events, or any information about event that you've attended and you'd like to share more. So with that, shall we start with our first segment about recent narrative events?
Yeah, before that actually, Bill Costello just recently published his multi-part how to narrative series of documents. So just this, if you have no idea how to narrative, read this.
That is a great start. Yeah,
it's like the Dungeon Master's Guide so the narrative gamer's guide. Like how to narrative, like how do you do this in the rules when there are no rules. So this is a good stop.
And that's great too, because we've kind of focused so much on helping each other with advice and feedback on designing and running narrative events, that we haven't really focused much on explaining to players, especially players that haven't done narrative before. And I've got something coming up next week where I'm trying to be conscious of reminding my players, especially the first-time players that haven't been to one of my events before, kind of what to expect, and definitely letting them know that this is not going to be a conventional one-day store tournament that they might be more used to.
Yeah, it requires a bit of explanation. I remember for me, going to Nova Open was very eye-opening. Of like, I can do this, and it actually once that clicks, then it's much more clear.
Yes. Yes. With a one-day event, you usually don't have that luxury. I know some Neos will talk about, you know, that first game round kind of being tough for some players to click. But once they get through that, they're off and running. And when you have a multi-day event, that can really bring everything together.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But even
anyway,
then,
with that,
the one-day events work really well. Like most of the
yes,
events are one-day events. So let's
yes.
go for the not so recent but past narrative events that are worth revisiting.
Yes, so actually the first event we want to talk about is actually from just over a year ago in Auckland, New Zealand. That is the Labyrinth of Eternity, and that is an event that Andrew Long, he goes by Andy Long on Twitter, and he ran that with his local group and created a lot of cool rules for basically players exploring a labyrinth that they could get lost in. And it was a one-day event, but it seemed well attended, and everybody seemed to have a lot of fun. There's a variety of stuff out there. He took some video, and there's definitely some pictures, and Nuno has collected an excellent set of slides here to share about that.
Oh, his mechanics. I mean, I almost used them for my event, but it required a bit more preparation. So it's essentially exploring a labyrinth. What Andrew did is they were exploring a labyrinth where it was a tomb of some lich pharaoh, and the armies were sort of like tricked into going into it searching for treasure. And every battle, before they start the battle, they had an exploration phase where they drew from a number of decks depending on where they want to turn in the corridor, and they would draw a card. They would find something, or they would keep walking, and this would essentially uh, they could find a trap, they could be cursed, they could find secret information, find a treasure chamber, and this would essentially affect the next battle. So they would do this until they find the exit into one of the realm chambers, which is where the battles would take place. And yeah, and
It looked like a great event. Yeah, the video looked like they were having fun flipping over cards. So it created a random effect. I think he had a choice where you could pick a compass direction to head, and that indicated which deck you would turn a card over for. But definitely a cool mix of choices with random effects.
I think throughout the missions, apparently had to find an arc, and you then had to perform a ritual to open the gate, so you'd go deeper into the labyrinth. This is very Indiana Jones inspired. And the final trial involved the players who got to the end. They had several crowns to pick from, and they had to pick the right crown. If they picked the wrong crown, they would just like their life force would be sucked out of them, and only the winner would pick the correct crown, and the correct crown actually would lead the pharaoh to take over the guy's body. So essentially, they would be possessed. That was the win.
Yes.
He would be possessed, and the pharaoh would take over the body. So there's kind of a little dark twist at the end.
Which is awesome, because narrative events is really about an exploration as a group of a story, and it's not, as I like to say, it's, you know, everybody wins in the enjoyment of the narrative together. So it's definitely not conventional platform with first, second, and third places at the end.
I think this. Yeah, if you can always have a chance for the underdogs or everyone to win at the very end, everyone is happy.
Yep, indeed. So a more recent event that we've had that we wanted to talk about was called Mind Over the Realms. This was in London in July 13th, 2019. And this was an event that I really liked seeing the coverage of this, because it was a charitable event It was highlighting mental health, and it was kicked off by Alex Lay, along with Steve Foote and Ming Lee. And their brilliant premise was to actually do a live stream of the event, and during the course of that, raise money for a raffle that involved some painted prizes, but they actually raised quite a bit of cash. It was like 1,400 pounds, which is a couple $1,000 US. Very impressive. But also very impressive to see what was on the table. Do you want to talk about that, Nuno?
Oh my God, it was amazing. So, so they got collaboration. So Alex got collaborations with Dark Fantastic Mills 3D printing. So did quite a bit of 3D terrain, and I've seen Fantastic Mills terrain in other events as well, I believe. They have like these very sort of like alien rock formations and these mushrooms, but I think what stole everyone's eye was Steve Foote's amazing Skaven engineering oriented shenanigans. This giant warp wheel. This was the premise of the whole event. It was essentially a gigantic Skaven warp wheel, a god machine was about to be activated, and essentially one part of the players was supporting the construction of this giant warp wheel, and the other half was trying to stop it. And they actually did something which there was kind of a sort of a coverage, like collegiate arcane news, kind of mocking CNN. So they did a sort of like a coverage of news of what was happening. And it was interesting to see this. This was a bit of a predecessor to the kind of coverage they did later on for Realms at War, which I think was brilliant. And the Steve Foote's there were so many Doom wheels, and then the
Yes.
giant warp wheel with green LEDs inside, and then you also had a laboratory and a warp mine, which I believe it's also been featured in Warhammer Achievements. I've seen that again on Twitter.
Yeah, that terrain table is making rounds to a variety of narrative events. But yeah, it looks very cool. It looks like this kind of weird, polluted, like mining center where there's just a pond that's got all the tailings of the warpstone mining, and of course, rail cars, and then that giant doom wheel is awesome. And I remember seeing the sketches of that too. He did Steve Foote did a whole series on Twitter, starting with the initial design sketches, and then he actually worked with Dark Fantastic Mills to create some of the components, because I think some of the pieces he needed were really large parts that need to be printed in a larger 3D printer. So that was really cool to see those different components come together. But still, then when you saw it on the table and it was all painted up, it was fantastic.
And it was stunning because they apparently had to find parts all over the other tables, and as they did, they built more sort of like the chassis protections on the side of the wheel. And apparently the wheel at some point was ready, and it was rolling around the table like up to 30 inches and smashing everything on the way, buildings, models.
There's no way to escape that kind of movement.
No, I think it was a great idea that they had. Apparently, they all the models tried to kind of conquer it, and in the end, they were like all kicked out, and the wheel just ran off the table with loads of endless spells inside.
Awesome.
No, it was good, and I think this was a good idea because they were talking about the live streaming and people following the event remotely. And I remember Ming said on Twitter that would this be a good idea to have the viewers affect the result of the event? And I wonder if this might have been what triggered their idea to do the voting for Realms at War to see whether Dracothfoot or Brightmane would win the voting.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it would be great to get one of those guys on the show and talk about that. I don't even want to scratch that surface because we could dive very deep into talking about Realms at War, and we we touched on that a little bit, but we haven't followed up, and I think
We'll get
that
back
could
to
be
it.
a whole show in itself. Yeah.
We'll get back to it. Yeah. All right.
So,
So, upcoming narrative events, right?
indeed.
Right. So we have you guys have 2 weeks to attend this. So this is the Plunging Spires Warcry event. We were trying to record this so we can put this out early enough. So this is the
Yes, and
Plunging
this is the
Spires. Yeah.
first Warcry narrative event, really. That's close to my heart. This is Stone Monk, and he is putting together another narrative event in. Well, he was kind of aiming towards October, I think, originally, but it's in November on the 16th, and it is all Warcry. I'm sorry, Nuno. I totally cut you off because when we start talking about Warcry, I get really excited.
We know there's never enough Warcry. Not enough Warcry.
So, never enough Warcry. So
Never.
It is in Madison, Wisconsin, at Misty Mountain Games. It is a bit far for me. It'd be about 16 hours drive for me for a one-day event. But man, if anyone in the Midwest can get out there for this, it's a one-day event, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And
Yeah,
it's
I mean
really
that's the more advertisement, the better. I mean that way more things get covered. You have enough things in Virginia, dude.
indeed. But yeah,
so this is the full of the Mortal Realms and Dogs of Warcry podcast crew, right? I mean, it's Eric, Aaron, Paul, David, Paven, and Mal. I don't know. There's a lot of them. I don't. They keep rotating in the podcast.
Yeah,
I don't know how many of them are. I believe they're all contributing, but they've been putting out a lot of content with the Mortal Realms and the Dogs of War now, of the Dogs of Warcry.
Dogs of Warcry is the preeminent Warcry podcast these days. Yes, indeed. So yeah, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up with that. It's a narrative Warcry campaign with 4 games, and the really cool thing about this is that they've created kind of like a 3D map of this region called the Plunging Spires, and the different warbands are searching this region for hidden treasures, and there's going to be, in between each game, there's actually going to be a map phase where players are bringing a model or a token to represent their warband and where they are on the map, and then they'll play games and then go back to the map. So it looks really cool. It got a cool dynamic with some map exploration, along with some fast playing Warcry games, because I think each game round is only an hour long.
Yeah, I mean, it's Warcry. I mean, it's meant to be faster, and it'll be cool to see kind of the exploration, because the games themselves can be faster. There's a bit more time and focus for the tactics. So yeah, their little game of risk around the 3D map, that'll look quite cool, and then they can negotiate and do alliances. And they also have something nasty. If the warriors die off, they're scratched off the roster.
Yep.
So it's gonna be high grind, warband mason, just like good old Mordheim. Not enough Mordheim. I should start making memes off of that.
Yes, you should.
And I believe they're getting also allies and mercenaries and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So, and it'll be. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this runs. That's one cool thing about not being involved with an event, is seeing it unfold, even from a distance, is still a lot of fun for me.
I mean, we're all learning, because we learn from everyone else's successes and failures.
Well, and I have to say, I borrowed this idea about the limited warband roster. Like, when fighters are lost, they're gone. So you might start off with 20 players, but you could lose those pretty quick.
So you don't have glory, you spend glory. So you keep counting all the glory you get. You get 1,000, and then you spend that, and then you just get more.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. I hope this works really well. I mean, I think I'm really curious to see this 3D map. I want to see I want to see the guys like playing around. Should be cool. Should be really cool.
Yeah, and with all those guys involved, definitely they should be doing some media coverage of it too, and hopefully some videos, definitely some pictures. So this will be cool to see in just a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. So this concludes our segments of events. We have more events that we'll be talking in the future, that covering events that have gone back maybe 2 years, possibly. That there's a lot of good stuff there. But now we have our interview segment, where we've interviewed Alex Polomeni, who just recently ran Animosity. Right. Now we are welcoming Alex Polomeni. We've invited Alex on the show to talk about global narrative events. He just ran Animosity 1. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
Welcome, Alex, and you're also getting prepared to run another Animosity event, which I am a big fan of.
Yep, got lots going on the Animosity front, and you can catch up on it all on animositycampaigns.com.
Yeah, you guys are lucky they were near each other as well.
Yeah.
That you can travel to each other's events.
Yeah. No, we've both played in each other's events a couple of times now.
What's great is there's a Texas Roadhouse right around the corner from Alex's store, and I love getting pork chops and those tall glasses of beer at Texas Roadhouse after his event.
So, Alex, what made Animosity 1 different from other narrative events? Like, what made it uniquely awesome?
Yeah, so Animosity campaigns, the way I would introduce it is that it is a worldwide map campaign where individual narrative event organizers take the Animosity pack and they run an event for their players over the course of the event, which will either be a weekend or it'll be a week. And these narrative event organizers report the results back to the campaign team. And we enter all the data into the campaign map. So it allows players all over the world to literally fight over the same campaign map at the same time, while still playing games with just their local group.
And it's generally how many games that you guys have generally planned for this?
So the formula we came up with is it's not structured like we give you 3 games to play and you knock them out. It's literally as many or as few games as each group can play, and by group I mean literally it can just be you and a friend. We didn't want to structure it too tightly. We wanted to allow the individual narrative event organizers to really make our event their own.
Okay, so you got players to write narratives, right? To contribute with the written narrative, and that would count towards the certain coalition and the results, correct?
Yes, players could write narrative reports, which were then judged and entered into the campaign engine.
And that was both narrative reports of battles they fought, but you could just simply, if you were not playing, submit a narrative, right?
Yes, and that is actually the. Let me see if I can clarify this for your understanding. We had several players who could not play games, so they wrote narrative reports instead and submitted those.
Exactly.
We had other players who, in their narrative notes, when they submitted the game, included a short write-up, which we would also attempt to reference.
Yep.
But that was not judged separately. Like, it was still the result of the game, and then we just had more meat to work with.
Gotcha. So my question, so that I knew, because that was something that we also said on the podcast last time, that that then you play a game, but you could also, instead of playing the game, do a hobby project or do the written narrative.
Yep. So we merged the game results and narrative from a half a dozen different narrative events, 2 in Virginia, 1 in Pittsburgh, 1 in New York City, I believe. We had an event out in Washington State, and we even had a narrative event organizer, or NEO, in Thailand. And we took all those events, and yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by that. That was a treat. So we took the results in the narrative, the results of games played and the narrative from all those different events, and we merged it all into a single cohesive campaign map and story. So the way it worked was that narrative event organizers could submit the results of their players' games to any location on the campaign map. And this allowed players to fight each other, even if they weren't physically playing each other across the tabletop. And so one event had, I believe, a Seraphon player, and he reported a battle there with some narrative notes. And there was, in a different coalition, there was a Spiderfang Gloomspite Git player, and he supported a battle. He reported a battle there, or his narrative event organizer reported it there for him. I was able to take the narrative notes from those two players, and in the turn update, kind of mesh like, hey, this army and this army fought each other at this place.
Mhm.
So between the individual narrative notes where players could list their, or again, their narrative event organizers submitting results on their behalf, could submit their army name, their general's name, and then any notes about the game, about their army. Just funny little stuff. So down in Blacksburg, Virginia, the event that ran there, apparently a wizard on top of a magical fulcrum threw a bunch of useless endless spells out and was then knocked off his fulcrum by a flying squig. And just little stuff like that, and we were able to bring that into our meta plot. Just little hijinks from people's individual games.
And all of that is collected in the omnibus of stories that you guys got from everyone else, right?
So yeah, on animositycampaigns.com, if you go to if you go to the about section and you go to past campaigns, I'm just getting ready to post stuff now, but yeah, after each campaign, we're compiling everything into what we're calling an omnibus, and that is all content related to that campaign, including our turn updates that we, the campaign team, write, and anything written by players. So all of that is compiled and archived in an easy-to-browse way, and it's just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun in the moment over the weekend that we ran the event, because it was 3 days and 3 turns, or 3 turns over 3 days, I should say. And it was just a lot of fun seeing all these little stories and being able to bring them together into our central narrative. And me and my good buddy Peter Charles, we stayed up. We spent about 5 or 6 hours each night for 3 nights in a row writing this, so that we could have a new update showing what had just happened that turn. First thing the next morning for players to read and see themselves in the story.
It was like a full weekend.
And I can't emphasize enough, too, because I was there for just one day, and I played 2 games. But it was really cool seeing, like, the next morning, games that I played having an effect on a wider level beyond just that one local group. And that was really a testament to to the work that you put into it, Alex, because you really did mesh a lot of different events at different places into a cohesive narrative. It was awesome.
Thank you. It was certainly a team effort. But between the players and the Neos, and then my buddy Peter and I doing the writing, at that moment. Just a I have to go on a quick tangent. Something I enjoyed that kind of made it all worth it for me afterward was I forget which event it was, but someone submitted a battle report, and I guess the way I understood it, the player couldn't think up a name for his Tzeentch general, so the Neo just submitted that his name couldn't be pronounced by mortal tongues. So I saw that, and I raised my eyebrow, and then I wrote, and reading from the Animosity 1 epilogue here, Irkut sent a champion of Tzeentch against the Horde then, a creature whose name could not be pronounced by mortal tongues. Yet it too was cast back across the river by King Gerlos the Good and Talaha the Butcher of Galaza. And so King Gerlos and Talaha are both player characters from different events. So I was able to write them in. But like a day or two later, I saw a post on Facebook that was like it quoted the could not be pronounced by mortal tongues. And like the Neo was just ecstatic. He's like, "That was me. I submitted that. Hey, so and so, this was your character." So that really, like, I saw that, and I'm like, okay, I did what I came here to do.
Yeah,
Or
man.
we did.
That's the thing. You create experiences, right? And just the fact that what he did that you then reported, and that's great.
Yeah, it's more than anything. I'm thinking back. More than anything, it's animosity is a exercise in collective storytelling. But like Aaron knows, I also joke that it's competitive open narrative. Because it's our intention for players to play to win. Like that, this is a war. You are trying to win the war, but it's everyone brings their own little story to the table, and it kind of all gets put in a blender.
I like when those two things align. I think the game works best when they can
I'd
align
agree with
without
that.
breaking. Yeah. So I wanted to hear that you go over this a bit. So you've ran animosity campaigns in a previous incarnation before, right?
Correct. And so to clarify, I personally have not led animosity campaigns before this Age of Sigmar incarnation. But animosity itself was kind of a legendary name in the old Warhammer Fantasy online communities, the old forum communities. Um, the name itself is a reference to the old animosity rule that orcs and goblins used to have, where if you roll a 1, they do nothing and fight each other. And animosity got its start, I believe, from players on the old orcs and goblins forum, the Warpath. So that was always kind of at the heart of the old campaigns, and those players got the ball rolling after Storm of Chaos. The Storm of Chaos Games Workshop Worldwide campaign supplement ended in 2004, and those players had a ton of fun with that campaign, and they wanted to keep the ball rolling. And like the original animosity story is a bunch of orc war bosses who are like, "Hey, our big boss is dead. We need to figure this out." So they just all crump each other, and that was literally the first animosity campaign.
Makes sense.
And so, but it kind of snowballed and it grew, and it went through. Um, what were we talking about earlier?
It's a forum format, right?
Yeah, it used to be forum based, and unfortunately forums have kind of gone passé. But I crunched the numbers shortly before the end times. More than kind of literally ended Warhammer Fantasy, and left the animosity brand adrift. So when I crunched the numbers, I came up with between 2004 and 2014, nearly 900 players participated in 12 campaigns, excuse me, culminating in over 8,000 threads and 175,000 unique posts.
All right, that's impressive. I mean, the more I think that should be much more widely known because it tells you that this works. People joined. People did this.
Yeah, and so when I was putting my notes together for this earlier, something I'll go ahead and mention is
Hmm.
my fellow narrative event organizer, Peter Charles, who helped co-write the narrative for these new animosity campaigns in Age of Sigmar. I met him through Animosity back in 2011, and this past summer I was a groomsman for him at his wedding. I flew out to Colorado and did his wedding with him. So I've made a lot of really great friends through Animosity. It's had a big impact on my life since I got involved in 2009, and it's just a really great experience that I wanted to that I keep saying but really the old players wanted to bring to a new generation of Warhammer players.
No, I think it's perfect, and thank you for doing it. Because I think this is really it's easy to get into global events because if you don't have anything prepared and you don't know how to do it, it's like you take a pack and you run it locally and you you meet people.
Yeah. No, it's because I mean that was your experience with the. I think you were talking with us earlier about malign portents, and that got you involved in all this. So yeah,
Definitely.
it starts small. In again in 2009 when I got involved in. At that time, it was Animosity 4 set in Cathay, the far east of the Warhammer world. Yeah, I was just a player, and over the years, I made friends. I joined the campaign team, and now, literally after the end times, I wanted to kind of carry the torch forward and keep the name alive and keep the experience alive.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about mentoring and then go to the next generation and take the next step.
Yeah, and I made a post to one of the Facebook groups that we're running for animosity campaigns. I made a post shouting with a shout out to the narrative event organizers from last time, because they've been pumped for what's what's coming next, Animosity 2, and that really seeing players that I didn't know before June, or seeing narrative event organizers that I haven't met in person, that I didn't know before they signed up for the June one, excited to do it again. I had a guy out in Washington State, one of my narrative event organizers, was like, "Yep, and we're going to be here for Animosity 3 as well." I'm like, "You've." I'm
There we go.
still writing the content for 2, but I'm glad you're you're pumped.
They're
Yeah,
funding the series for yet another season.
is that they're funding it with their excitement dollars.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah. So I'm gonna get on my soapbox here for a minute. Animosity exists because Storm of Chaos. And I remember Storm of Chaos. That was when I was first getting into the hobby, and that was this huge, amazing community building thing. But then they just never did anything like that again, pretty much to this day.
So a Storm of Chaos bigger and different compared to, say, I mean, the what was it called? Like the Seeds of Hope. That was just kind of like a meter that you're like, oh, which Grand Alliance is going to control this? That was very bare bones, right?
So Storm of Chaos was similar, but the Warhammer community was just really strong at that point. So it was just massive, and people, without trying to take a shot at Seeds of Hope, people actually cared. So
Take a shot, don't worry.
there was this big forum called Conclave of Light, and like that was my first experience with Warhammer internet forums, and it was people I met there that would eventually pull me in on Animosity. They did the same thing. They organized like who needs to put reports where, and they would crunch results. And with like it was a 2-month campaign, so with like 2 weeks to go, Chaos was nowhere near Middenheim, like the final objective.
Ooh.
And Games Workshop was just like, "Hey, they're at the walls now," because otherwise they were never going to get there. And then they didn't, like, the dynamic didn't change, even though Games Workshop teleported them into the siege. So that was where you had the final narrative that they published in, I assume, online, but it was in White Dwarf as well, that Gav Thorpe wrote, where Archaon fought Volton and wounded him, but before he could finish off Volton, Grimgor Ironhide came in and headbutted Archaon. So just everyone lost.
And that's the part I know.
So
I mean, I didn't know they teleported Chaos. That's interesting, because that teaches like us a few lessons on like how to run global events if we're planning on some sort of story to happen.
yeah, I feel like they did it with Eye of Terror, from what I know of that, and they did it with Storm of Chaos, where like they pretty much they thought they knew how it was going to go, and then when the players didn't do that, which, like any Dungeons and Dragons DM should know, players never ever do what you want them to do. It never goes how you plan. So when it didn't do that, they kind of got caught out, and the story suffered for it. So yeah, I'd completely agree with that. There were definitely lessons there.
Alex, what is something you learned from Animosity 1 that you are planning to incorporate into Animosity 2?
So that's pretty straightforward. After Animosity 1, I realized I needed to invert my design philosophy and write the pack for Animosity 2 from the ground up. So what I had done with Animosity 1, I was so focused on trying to make this an accessible global event that any narrative event organizer, like the for anyone who remembers the Coalescence campaigns that ran for a couple of years, the one-day narrative events, I was focused on trying to kind of pick up that torch and be like, okay, I want something accessible that anyone can run and they can make it their own. And I got to the weekend of the campaign at my own local, that I was running locally for my own players, and I realized like I haven't put any thought into what like I want this experience to be for my own local people. So this time around, I'm looking at like, well, what is an event that I would want to play in? What would be exciting for me? Write that and then upscale it into a toolbox for other people to use. And I think that'll make for a smoother and just generally more interesting event, and it'll be easier for me to write too.
So you mean like having building blocks like put into the pack itself so that people can use these little bits in their story locally?
Yeah, so one of the things that came up was like the our narrative event organizer down in Blacksburg, Virginia. He went all out. He ran with it.
Can we just name him? Can we just refer
I'll
to
let you do it.
Duncan?
Yeah,
So
Duncan.
Duncan Hall.
Hi, Duncan.
Yeah, we love Duncan.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you're listening, you're the best, Duncan. You're equally the best with the rest of our narrative event organizers.
He was actually featured as a Neo of the Month like a year or two ago. So he's not too much of an aside, but yeah, he's been running narrative events since AOS came out in 2015.
He runs them every month, and I think he just picked up Animosity in like his normal slot and ran it instead. So yeah, to get back to the point, so he literally finished our campaign map for us. He came up with a bunch of original content. He proofread part of the pack I was writing, and he came up with his own battle plans, and he just ran with it. And it was his event that had the bat squig knocking the wizard off his big flying pedestal. But then, so I got to my event, and my players are like, "Hey, what battle plans are we using?" And I'm like, "Whatever you want." And I realized that was just super weak. I'm like, oh, I made this too open-ended, and so
you
yeah,
spent too much time hanging out with me.
That's yeah. I noticed you didn't ask me that.
Too casual.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't ask me that. You're just like, hey, Skaven gonna fight some
Sylvaneth.
Yeah.
My Warlord was really mad that he stole his stick, so let's go.
Yeah, and I remember that. I'm trying to remember. Didn't he get chased off the table by bees? I feel like
yeah, twice, both games, he got chased off the table by bees. Yeah, it was
Is
amazing.
that a special rule? What?
No, what? it was the narrative play on Drycha like launching.
Yeah, her Flutter Furies.
Yeah, and rather than saying he actually lost his last wound and fell to the ground in a heap of unconsciousness, we just said he got chased off the field by flutterflies, leaving his clan rats behind on the battlefield to be slaughtered.
Legit.
Yeah, I was just checking back through the update. We that's turn 1. I was trying to find turn 2. I feel like we wrote your Skaven Warlord getting chased off the field. I feel like that is now immortalized into canon.
Yeah, we should use that term. Yeah, what happens in your event is now canon.
Yeah, it's our canon.
Mm-hmm.
But that actually gets to a really important point with what we're trying to do with Animosity campaigns, which is that we want players to feel like they're contributing to a story that's bigger than them, and their contributions matter, and that they're making a difference in the course of this war. Because every campaign like we have a meta plot. We basically we line up a bunch of doors, and we wait to see which doors the players walk through. So it is very open ended. We don't have an ending in mind. We have concepts like to write the meta plot. We know we have to have some concepts for where it could go, but then the way we phrase it is like we set the stage, and then you guys improv it, and then we figure out where the story goes from there. So that you guys, the player contributions are writing the story as we go.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if I don't know if this would help, like as the event goes along, to kind of as you give the update, you'd give the positions of where the certain coalitions are or control certain parts in the terrain, like essentially on the field, so that I don't know if that could help other coalitions decide from which angle to attack. I don't know if that could be interesting.
So it could be interesting because we did that.
There we go.
So we published, I forget what we called it, but basically to use layman terms, each update had the fluff part and then it had the crunch part, and the crunch part was map control. So each location on the campaign map is a pie chart, and when players feed reports into the pie chart, it swings the pie chart, and whoever has the largest chunk holds the location. So the way we split this up was we came up with some terminology. So like I'm gonna just give some examples from the turn 2. So this would have been at the end of Saturday. So at the end of Saturday, because it was again 3 days, 3 turns. So at the end of the second turn, I have the Sigmar's mock delegation defended Grung Essek, and then in parentheses contested by the Horde. So what that tells you is that it tells you the Sigmar's mock delegation is defending Grung Essek, which was this big Duarden arch at the north end of the city. So it tells you they hold it, they successfully defended it, but it was attacked by the Horde. So then the next one I have the Reclamation captured Rahip Mazar, which was, again in parentheses, strongly contested by the Varan Pact and the delegation. So that tells you the Reclamation, the coalition, the Reclamation, which was undead, or death, I guess we're calling it now, captured Rahip Mazar, which translates to the priest's tomb. So they captured it, but not by much. It was strongly contested by the Chaos Varan Pact and the Order Delegation coalitions. So my intention was that players could look at this and like I'm not giving, because to go back to the first animosity campaign I was in back in 2009, the game masters were posting the actual pie charts, and people raged when they saw like they didn't capture a location by like 0.3%. Like that was a whole scandal. People were angry about it. So like we learned like, nah, we'll make it a little more narrative, and we'll just give you the information. So if you see it's contested, strongly contested, stuff like that, who's attacking you, where they're attacking you.
I see.
And interestingly, the first 2 turns, there was a location at the south of the map, Yul Grimnir, which was Grimnir's Road. I don't know why I said Grungni there. So we had a location at the southern end of the map, Grimnir's Road, and for the first 2 turns, so Friday and Saturday, no one reported a battle there. And I put on this Yul Grimnir was not contested. And then Sunday morning, I had like 3 of my local players be like, is no one fighting for this? And they just all went for it. So it was bitterly contested on the last day after players ignored it for 2 days.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. Would it help to so you just told them the information. Would it help to actually have it on a map itself?
Yes, and unfortunately that was just something with everything else we were trying to pull together. The old Warhammer Fantasy campaigns, the old Warhammer Fantasy campaigns did have a map that was updated every turn to visually show you where people were moving on the map and where they were fighting, but we just didn't have time or energy for that.
I see. You could just send an image. That works.
We see what I think is I think we need an intern. Like I hear this podcast got to go do the
I
legwork
think you
for
should. I
us.
think you need to get an intern.
Interns are the best.
If there's any volunteers out there who like recoloring maps, hit me up.
Yeah.
I will gladly pay you nothing to work really hard.
Hype dollars,
Yes.
enthusiasm dollars.
Yeah, there we go. $dollars.
Narrative points. You can earn
Narrative
Yes,
points.
narrative points. Oh man, I miss narrative points. Aaron, you should just come up with coins that represent narrative points, and you can give them out like gold stars.
So, Alex, what should players expect to experience while participating in Animosity 2, the upcoming map campaign that's following up to Animosity 1? And specifically, why is it this one the one they don't want to miss?
Loaded questions.
Suddenly not so casual.
Yeah, getting serious. So they don't want to miss it because I don't want players to feel like they want to miss any of our campaigns, because we want to be an exercise in the butterfly effect. So any player contribution at any level will impact our narrative, our story, and where campaigns go from here. So what we hope players will experience when participating in Animosity 2 and 3 and 4, and as long as we're doing this, is they should feel like they're part of a larger war. My pinned tweet on Twitter at Old Stonebeard is competitive players fight battles, narrative players wage war, and like that's kind of my creed, and that's what I hope to bring to the player experience.
Should write that down.
So I would say they don't want to risk missing this one because there is a lot at stake from Animosity 1. There's several major plot threads that are carrying over. One of the biggest ones is that Irkut the Spineless, a Varangard, got his hands on a unmodified Enlightenment engine. So if you're familiar with the Forbidden Power supplement that came up this past summer, you'll know an Enlightenment engine is basically a massive Wikipedia created by Techless. And Sigmar got Grungni to reverse the polarity and basically make them dum-dum engines. But so Irkut, direct servant of Archaon, got his hands on one that hasn't been tampered with. So he's filling his brain with a lot of information that he shouldn't have, and he's going to start putting it to use. So that's one of the threads that we started in the last campaign. Players had to fight to claim the location, the Tower of Light that had this buried in the basement, and they pulled that off. They dug this thing out, and now Irkut, the same character from the last campaign, non-player character, is taking it forward. So there's going to be big stuff to resolve from last time, and there's going to be big stuff that's going to come up this time that we're really excited to write.
So what this means is that a player did this during their battle. This is a reward that they've gotten, and you guys in the background are awarding the player with something extra narrative going forward, correct?
Not quite. So going into Animosity 1, we had a coalition. Sorry, I should use the right phrasing. We had a coalition called the Varan Pact, and that was servants of Slanesh and Tzeentch, and they were led by a what we call a figurehead, which is a non-player character.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and basically the figurehead, Irkut, tells his generals, which are the player characters, he's like, hey, there's this ruined elf tower over there, I want to dig it up. And so the players submitted their battles, and they took the location, they held the location, and then at the end we revealed, like, hey, you succeeded in the objective that your non-player character, your figurehead that you guys are kind of organized around, you done good, here's what you found. And if they hadn't succeeded, that story would have gone a different direction. But they did succeed, so that's a plot point that then gets carried forward.
I see. So they're essentially sort of empowering their general NPC.
Of a fashion, but we don't want it. We don't want it to be too railroady. But we do need some tools to kind of steer the meta plot, and we do that through the figurehead NPCs. But I want to stress, like, they are not the player characters, the generals of the armies. Like, they're drawn to this time and place that the campaign exists in. Like, they're drawn there by the figurehead, but they don't serve the figurehead. They're only loosely affiliated. They're not, unless players choose to be in their own story. They're not directly subservient. We don't want to railroad. That's a huge part of our MO, is we really don't want to railroad. But we do throw objectives out there and then see where the players take it.
It also helps them kind of ground their own narrative as well, because then they have a narrative hook. Like, there's this figurehead, he's doing something, he is quirky in this or that way, so it helps them sort of like rotate and sort of orbit this bigger character.
Exactly, and that is really our hope with those characters, is that you can write your own narrative in relation to your figurehead, in relation to the other Age of Sigmar factions in your coalition, and in relation to the setting itself. So, like, the last campaign took place in Giron, the Realm of Life, out in the wilderness, and now for Animosity 2, this Realm Gate has been opened between where everyone was fighting and a lake in Shaiish, the Realm of Death. So now the war is literally spilling over into another realm.
Cool. So, and what else can they expect, like, for Animosity 2? What else will it have?
Right now, the end of this week, I'm publishing a Warcry supplement, because of course Warcry dropped and certain people in this call got super hyped about it. Aaron,
what are you talking about?
This is what happens when you mute your mic. So Warcry dropped, and I knew I wanted to do something with that. So we're doing what I'm thinking of as a prelude campaign, where we're going to have 6 unique campaign quests, which take place between Animosity 1 and Animosity 2. So it's literally a Warcry pre-sequel. And that will lead directly into Animosity 2 itself for Age of Sigmar. So we got the Warcry supplement coming out. And then for the campaign itself, we're expanding from 3 days, 3 turns across 3 days. We're expanding from that template to 5 turns across 10 days, which will be over 2 weekends. Well, it's a good thing, because it's a good thing for 2 reasons. One, I'll be able to get a night's sleep between writing turn updates. And 2, we'll be able to include 2 weekends, because I got a lot of feedback from people, even just local players, who are like, well, this is the weekend I work, I can't make it. So we decided to expand it a little bit to try to scoop up more players.
So it might mean that some of them actually, like, join the battle halfway and still contribute.
Absolutely. So each turn, it is a turn-based campaign. So when reports are submitted by means of a Google Doc, they're all time-stamped. So we take all the reports submitted between midnight one day, or I think it was 11 p.m. Eastern time. Like, between this point and this point, we take all those, we feed them into an Excel document, which shoutout is put together by Nick Chapman, also known as Bythier Soon on Twitter. I think it's just @Bythier. He does all our mechanics work. So thank you for making this possible, Nick. But yeah, so we take those results and we just feed them in. So literally, you can report at any time during the turn, and it just gets plugged in at the end of the turn. So there really is no coming early, late, whatever. You report your battles when you can, and they can make all the difference.
Awesome. So, and what are your expectations? Like, what do you hope to get out of running the second animosity with this 2-step Warcry, Age of Sigmar?
So first and foremost, I'm hoping to make the narrative event organizers who are already on board and already invested in our story. I'm hoping to give them a good show. And beyond that, the reason we want to run 2 events per year is to just keep the momentum and the interest up. Something we wanted to do over the last few months, which we're looking at doing going forward, is what we're calling Warpath, which is a reference to our roots, the Warpath Forum. We want it to be an off-season between events to keep people engaged in the hobby and keep them preparing for the next event, and keep narrative play front and center. So like on Twitter, you'll see the hashtag Road to Raw. We want to kind of bring something like that to the table. But yeah, I don't know.
So the Warpath will be a social media engagement thing.
Yeah. But to answer your question, like, my expectations are to give people a reason to play games and have a good time.
No, I think this is a good engine, and it's a good format, and it's got Warcry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Gee. Golly gee willikers, really, Aaron?
Always need more Warcry.
Not enough Warcry.
Not enough Warcry.
So yeah, I want to do it anyway, but I don't think Aaron would have been satisfied if I hadn't tried to incorporate that somewhere.
That will be also a good experience, because if I remember correctly, you're planning an interesting multiple branching convergences quests, like the depending on the results of the convergence of the Warcry, you're gonna have a different outcome at every branching point.
That is correct, and that's actually the whole reason I wanted to do it. And ironically, it's a ton of work, which I'm now slogging through to try to get it ready. But like the mechanics part, I wrote that in like an afternoon, but the narrative part, that's taken a little bit longer. But yeah, so
it's a huge effort, man.
Yeah, well, it's fun at the same time, so that's why I do it. Labor of love. So just to give an example, there's a character from the Animosity 1 lore, a Lord Celestin, named Han Shinzong. And he comes up. He was just a background non-player character that we wrote in. When we were looking at what to do with Warcry, I was like, all right, so Han Shinzong took an echelon of Dracothian Guard, and he plunged through this new realm gate, and he disappeared. And now it's you've been dispatched as a Stormcast Eternal Vanguard Chamber Warcry warband. You've been dispatched to go through the realm gate after him and find out what happened to him. So depending on, you'll go through your 3 convergences, but each time you hit a convergence, instead of just beating your head against it until you beat it, win or lose, you still advance. But the final narrative you end up with will change based on those wins or losses. So if you get nothing but wins, you're rewarded by a really interesting revelation. But if you get nothing but losses, it doesn't end well for you.
I think there's a lot to experiment with that format, because you
I
always advance.
I really like that idea, because that's the one thing I've run into with the Warcry campaign that I'm doing, is players that get hung up on that convergence and end up winning or end up losing 3 times in a row, and then they kind of feel like they're falling behind, having some kind of narrative reward, even if it's different from the win,
Yeah.
can be more satisfying than just having to keep replaying the same game multiple times.
Yeah, and I saw that in the out of the book Warcry campaign we ran, where between these two convergences, two of the players that could be there like a lot of the time, one of them ended up playing the ritual, like that victory condition, played it I think 7 times in a row.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's tough.
yeah, we kind of saw where the convergences, rules as written are a really cool idea, but they can get frustrating.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out with a lot of players too, and
it's
getting
been fun.
getting some data.
So after, and I just want to touch on real quick, after the campaign quests are over, I'm writing. I'm going to straight up say it is a hodgepodge that I kind of cut and pasted out of a bunch of different parts of the core book and the Monsters and Mercenaries book. But I've tried to sort of weld together this Frankenstein of narrative open battle play. So the entire purpose of it is, I'm like, I got a Warcry warband and I want to bring. So first off, we've allowed you to take an ally from Monsters and Mercenaries as your leader. So like you got a hero in there. Like I want to take a band at a high points value, like 1,500 points. I want a bunch of heroes and I want a huge monster. Like I want a reason to break out my Terrorgeist in Warcry and someone else's monster. So the whole thinking there is to try to get high points warbands that you can just crash into each other.
That's gonna be interesting.
So
yeah, which I think I borrowed from you, Alex, because that's kind of what I'm planning for the 5th of November is warbands with each warband has a bonus ally and a bonus monster.
nice.
And we're gonna do Triumph and Treachery multiplayer.
Oh, good.
Right on.
Yeah, it should be fun, if nothing else. This sounds awesome, Alex. Where can players go to find out more information and what dates Animosity 2 is happening?
So like I said at the top, you can go to animositycampaigns.com, spelled exactly like it sounds, all one word. I'm still working on getting everything updated, but all the information you'll need to participate in Animosity campaigns now and forever will always be uploaded on that website just as soon as I get around to it, because unlike your Filthy Casual podcast, I do not have an intern. Animosity 2 itself, so just to reiterate, the Warcry campaign will be dropping on the website this weekend. It's play at your own pace. It's just an event pack. Do whatever you want with it. Animosity 2 itself, so we're calling it Animosity 2 The Burning Winter, will take place from...
We apologize. We got word from Alex after our recording that the dates for Animosity 2 are not yet set. So this will be posted on the website as soon as they are known. So please keep tuned.
Again, 2 weekends, 5 turns, 10 days. Any level of participation makes a difference. So if you want to just write your narrative and send it to us in short stories, that'll count. If you want to organize, a huge event with 20 players, whatever it is, get in touch with us. You can drop us an email at animositycampaigns@gmail.com, and we have all our social media and contact information on the website too, in the About section. Just get in touch with us, and we'll certainly be happy to have you on board and help you get going and participate.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome, Alex. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
telling
man.
us about Animosity.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. All right, folks, that's all for this show. We'll come back soon, roughly a month or so, We plan to be a very casually dated podcast. We'll put it up when it's necessary. And there are a few more narrative events coming towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year. So we have Holy Wars, correct?
Yes, indeed. And then at LVO, Bill is going to be running his Oasis of Flame event.
Mm-hmm. And I am planning an event as well in the Boston area, which will be somewhere in December, but I still don't have the dates yet. So I'll put that up eventually at some point. And well, I guess we are off, and we can see you guys next time.
Yep, it was good. It was good talking with you, Nuno, and great talking about narrative events, past, present, and future.
And we'll keep at it. Take care, guys. See ya.